Well, hello, Bible heads. This is Dr. Wayne coming at you with your Sunday morning Power Bible Study. How's everybody doing today? I know we didn't have a nativity service today, and I hope y'all tuned in for the bishop's service at 9 o'clock, and so we're coming on at a regular time, 11:20, I guess. Why not? You don't want to change anything, so I guess we're keeping it at 11 o'clock, 11:20 today, so let's do this, okay? I'm going to look at the passage in Genesis. Was it last week? We've had some wonderful stories in here from Genesis. We had that story, a few weeks ago. We had the creation story. We had Abraham and Isaac. Remember that? Abraham and Isaac. And then we had Isaac gets a wife. Last week was chapter 22. That was 24. This week we are in chapter 25. And chapter 25, Isaac just got a wife. It was a short story for Isaac. There wasn't much that happened between the time of the end, narratively speaking, from the end of last week's service, last week's passage where Isaac took Rebekah. And then chapter 25 basically is a summary statement of a lot of things. And then we begin here in chapter 25, verse 19 to the end of the chapter, and a very pivotal event. Are you there? Yes. Genesis chapter 24, verses 19 following. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. We heard that story last week, right? Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, of Padan Aram, sister of Laban, the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. You know, we've had drama already, right, with the barren wife. We had that with Sarah, right? That was Sarah. Sarah was Isaac's mother, right? And so our writer just loves that narrative line of she's barren. Oh no, crisis. What are we going to do? But apparently he didn't want to make a whole deal out of it because we didn't get a whole lot of details, did we? Very simple. Prayed because she was barren. Lord granted prayer. She conceived. Boom. I don't know. It almost feels like our writer is trying to say, you know how this story goes, okay? We don't have to go into all that, do we really? Verse 22. The children struggled together within her. Oh, not only did she conceive, but she conceived twins, right? Were we told that she conceived twins? No, just that she conceived. And verse 22 it said, the children. So not only did she conceive, but wow, God really overplayed this one. It's like, boom, okay, how about this? I'll make it 2 this time, all right? 2, how about I get 2, all right? I'll double up on what I did last time. And so that's what we have here. The children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is to be this way, why do I live? Now, in the Hebrew, it is very unclear what it is saying. We have this English translation from our Syriac version. The Syriac version, the Syriac version of the Old Testament is a very interesting version because it's called the Peshitta, Peshitta, Peshitta. The Peshitta, the Syriac version, A lot of it, even though it's not in Hebrew, it is an older version of the story than what the Hebrew is. Huh? So sometimes the Peshitta gives us understanding. This is an example of that, because if we just look at the Hebrew text, it's like, no, what does this say? We're not sure what this is. But in the Syriac Peshitta, it gives us, if it is to be this way, why do I live? So she went to inquire of the Lord. Oh, inquiring of the Lord. This is you gotta remember, this isn't like when King David would go and inquire of the Lord, okay? This isn't that. This is a time, this is in the Abraham days, we're talking Genesis here, right? So what did you do when you went to inquire of the Lord? Well, you went to the local, person the soothsayer person in town, and this is what you get. I mean, I don't know if you really want to think that people are hearing audible voices of God. I really don't know if that's fruitful. I really don't. Especially if all it does is make you feel bad about the fact that you've never heard God speak to you audibly, right? Verse 23. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger. Now, we are an informed reader. We're not an ignorant reader. Narrators have to take a position of like, what kind of a narrator are they going to be? Are they going to be an omniscient narrator? Are they going to be only a narrator from one particular point of view? There's also a presumption behind the narrator of what kind of a reader we've got. We aren't an ignorant reader. We are an informed reader, which means we know where this is going. We know this is all about the birth of Jacob and Esau. And we all know about what they represent by the nations that sprung from them. And if you don't know, then stay tuned. You will no longer be the ignorant reader. You will actually find yourself being the informed reader. Okay, all right, very good. One shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger. Verse 24. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. Oh, now we see the word twins. Verse 25. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle. So they named him Esau. Esau. I don't know. I did not look to see if there's a conjunction between the Esau and the word for hairy. I did not look that up. Be a good thing to know, huh? I know it doesn't mean red. That means something else. We'll get to that later. 26. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Now, the name Jacob literally means he takes by the heel, or he supplants, the one who's grasping. So Jacob is the one who he's born as one like grasping onto somebody else's like he can't. It's as though he can't do it by himself. It's kind of like in politics, grabbing somebody's coattails, that kind of thing. Here we have that. He's a supplanter. What that tells us is that Jacob is going to be somewhat of a conniver, somewhat of a trickster, and we're going to see that in this story today, but we're going to see it later in his life too. Like when he's trying to get married and he deals with his father-in-law, and his father-in-law tricks him. A lot of trickery going on here with Jacob. Jacob, the one who would become Israel. very important to see that from his very birth, he was one who was overreaching just a little bit. Like, even though I'm not the firstborn, I'm like, I'm going to try and be that firstborn. So it is with Israel. So he was named Jacob, which means supplanter, one who supplants. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. Verse 27. Verse 27. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. So the stark contrast, once again, this isn't the first time we've seen a story of brothers in the Bible, even in Genesis, who were starkly different, right? Cain and Abel didn't one was more oriented towards the animals, and the other more oriented towards the produce. Those are the hunters, and then the gatherers. Those the hunters were usually the men, the manly men. The hunters go out and hunt, bring it home. The gatherers were usually the ones that were the homebodies, who planted, gathered, harvested, plucked, found, that kind of thing, but didn't go out and do the manly stuff. So we have these gender roles even today, do we not? That we have the more like, we identify like, oh, the manly thing is to go out and kill the beasts and bring home the bacon. No, they would never bring home bacon, right? Because that wasn't kosher. But here, Jacob is the quiet man living in tents. When you're a skillful hunter, a man of the field, you don't live in tents. You live out in the open air, like a cowboy, like that way. That's the kind of thing we got. So Jacob is kind of being portrayed as like, in the words of Hans and Franz. Do you know Hans and Franz? Yeah, Dana Carvey and Kevin Nealon from Saturday Night Live from back in the 80s or 90s. Jacob would be kind of like the girly man, the manly man, the girly man. There you have it. Verse 28, Isaac loved Esau. Now remember, when we see this word love, we're not talking emotions. We're not talking covenant love. We're not talking love versus hate. We're talking preference. We're talking in terms of like preferred, like how a parent might quote unquote love one. No, I love all my kids equally. Well, you might, but you do show preference maybe for one over the other. Maybe you might not admit it, but you do. It happens. Anyway, love here is in the sense of prefer, as in like, identify more with this guy. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob, preferred, okay? So Rebekah would come to be later on. We don't actually get the story in our Sunday morning readings, because next week we're going to be dealing with Jacob at a later time. But this is the beginning of Jacob's life, where he's going to get. Spoiler alert! In this episode, he's going to trick Esau out of his elder son birthright. Okay, I just said it right there. Later on, Isaac will bestow a blessing, the blessing that normally would go to the elder brother, he's going to give it to Jacob by mistake. And why am I talking about this now? Because Jacob was in cahoots with his mother, Rebekah. Hence, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And so, since we're not going to get that story next week, I just wanted to get that in there, that Rebekah was a part of Jacob's scheme. And we don't even know if it was Jacob's scheme. It looked more like it was Rebekah's scheme than it was Jacob's. Anyway, this is where it all begins, though. Verse 29. Genesis chapter 25, verse 29. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, you see, this is what you do if you're the homebody and you're living in the tents and your mother loves you, guess what? You're going to learn how to cook. My mother loved me, but I don't cook. I don't cook. Sorry about that. Had something in my teeth there. Okay, so once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. Oh, such a hard day of hunting. I'm just famished. Esau said to Jacob, let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished. We're not told what kind of a stew it was at that time, but just that it was red. Probably a lentil stew. There are red lentils. You can get lentils in all colors. You can get green lentils, yellow, red. I don't know if there's other colors, but those are the main ones I've seen. Yellow, red, green. And yeah, when you make it into a stew, that's what you get. It's red. All right. Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished. I've been hunting all day. And apparently he didn't bring, I don't know, apparently he didn't bring any meat home. Or he just didn't want to go through the work of cooking it. I don't know. Or maybe you don't always eat what you bring that night. I don't know. Do you see that little parenthetic thing in verse 30? No. Yeah, 31. No, the end of verse 30, right before 31. Therefore, he was called Edom. So there is a country on the other side of the Jordan, south of Moab. So you got the Transjordanian area, that area that Gad and Reuben and the Transjordanian tribes, they settled. And then you have south there, you have Moab. Moab is like if you look at the Dead Sea, the area immediately to the right, which is east of the Dead Sea, that's Moab. And then south of that, Edom. Edom was a nation that eventually... they were always subservient to Israel in some way. Notice, therefore, he was called Edom. The word Edom literally means red. Idmea. Idmoa. There was Edom, Admoni, that's what it is. Admoni, A-D-M-O-N-I, that's Admoni. That's the word for red, Admoni. Edom is a way of turning that adjective into a noun, Edom. Okay, very good. And this is a story, this is what you call an etiological story. It gives us a story that accounts for the origin of something. It accounts for the origin of the name of the nation Edom is because it was started by Esau's people. Therefore, he was called Edom. Verse 31, Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." That's we don't know if Jacob. We aren't told that Jacob was like, what can I do to get that birthright from him? All we've been told about Jacob is the way he was born. Remember that? The only thing we were told was the way he was born, and what was that? By grabbing the heel That's what his name means. Supplanter, one who takes by the heel, like grabbing onto you. Like, it's not so much but to pull, it's not so much that you're trying to pull yourself forward as you're trying to pull that person back. A supplanter, pulling him back. Okay? So first, sell me your birthright. Well, if we understand exactly who Jacob is, then we think, oh, well, of course he's going to try to get the birthright. Because that's what a supplanter does. That's what a Yaakov does. Yaakov, that's the way you would pronounce Jacob in Hebrew. Yaakov. Verse 32, Esau said, I'm about to die. Oh, I'll do it in my Esau voice. Hey, I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me? And I didn't bring any meat home. Arr. So give me some of that red stuff. Arr. I don't need my freaking birthright. Sure, you can have it. Whatever. What good is it to me? I'm hungry. Arr. So he's kind of like depicted as an oaf. Somebody who's being outwitted. Somebody maybe not all that bright. And this is a slam on how they view that nation called Edom. They did not look highly on Edom. By the way, later on, after the exile, when Israel was, not Israel, but Judah was exiled, and then they came back in the 5th century. When they came back, who had had moved in and taken up that vacuum that they when they left? The people of Edomia, yes, the Edomites, Edom, and that's the reason why we find some of the later prophets, especially those short prophets. I can't think of which it was, Nahum or Haggai, one of those guys in the book of the 13 or 12, whatever the minor prophets. All it is a bunch of oracles saying, "Down with Edom, down with Edom. We down with Edom. We don't like Edom. Edom is bad. They took advantage of us when we were down. Blah blah blah." And so there is bad blood all the way through the biblical story between Edom and Israel. Okay. Swear to me first. So he swore to him. Jacob said, swear to me first. What's that? I got a note there. Swear to me today. Okay. So he's basically like saying, like, yeah, I know nobody's about to receive birthright yet, but you got to swear to this. I'm getting this in writing. No, we didn't actually get it in writing, but when you swear, when you vocally saying things, puts it right out there as a contract. They didn't need to get things notarized back then. When you spoke it, it existed. Sound familiar? Like Genesis 1:1, creation of the world. God said, let there be, and there was. The creativity of the word, very important. And Jacob said, swear to me first, swear to me today. So he swore to him. I'm in verse 33 of Genesis 25. So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Verse 34. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. That's when we find out it was lentil stew. Before then, it was just said stew, and then there was red. Now it's lentil stew. And he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So yeah, this is an etiological story trying to tell us, it creates an answer to the question, what's with Edom? It's kind of like, how we have these these stupid jokes in America. I remember back in the 60s and 70s, people used to tell, remember those, they were called Pollock jokes, remember that? Which didn't really make sense to me because I didn't think that was really about anybody from any country, because there was no country that was called Polack land. So I didn't really understand why people thought they were the same thing. Anyway, but yeah. Oh, you heard the one about the Edomite? Yeah, this is what is going on. This is an etiological story explaining why Israel always seemed to have the upper hand over Edom. Edom never quite made any kind of a splash. They ended up, like I said, in the 5th century-ish, being sucked over into that area, that vacuum that when Judah got exiled. And so there was a little bit of bad blood there. This is a story that tells us and answers the question, well, why are they always so bad to each other? Why are those Edomites so stupid? Well, they've always been stupid. Let me tell you a story about Esau and Jacob. Yeah, exactly. That's what this is all about. Remember how last week I mentioned that the story that we had about Rebecca being procured as a wife for Isaac. It was a straightforward story. It was and it was told through the lens of that servant of Abraham, right? And it was a pleasant story. It was no trickery. Everything went according to plan. The way that when the servant told God, here's what I want it to look like. I want to be able to, go to this. I'm going to see a girl. She's going to offer me water. She's going to offer my camels water. Let that be the one. Made it very simple. And you know what? All of it was that simple. And that is a rarity in Scripture. Most of the time, what we get in Scripture are stories that are filled with trickery and, oops, fooled you on that one. A lot of that going on. This is all good. Why? Here's why. Scripture, what it does is it tells us stories that are not so much prescriptive as they are descriptive. You get that? There's not so much they're not prescribing or even proscribing. They're not saying like, hey, be like this. And they're not always saying like, oh, be like this. Just because it's telling a story doesn't say, yeah, everybody should be just like this. No. What it's doing, it's describing how we are as humans, how we relate to God, how we don't relate to God, how we relate to each other, how we don't relate to each other, how sometimes we treat each other honorably, sometimes we treat each other dishonorably. We got to figure out when we see it, what is it I'm supposed to take home about the way it is here? What's the take-home point here? Does it say like, that means that it's okay to be a trickster? It's okay to be a trickster. Yeah, go ahead, be a trickster. Be a supplanter. Be like Jacob. No, that's not what it's saying. What it is saying is that God's got a lot of grace. God's got a lot of room for our shenanigans. Even though we think we're messing things up, and we do, we mess things up horribly. And sometimes we mess things up to the point that we lose something that we could have, but there's still something to be had. We must look for ourselves. And we have to rely on who God is. We have to rely on God's grace. I'm smarter, so I got everything figured out. No, not necessarily. God will work through us even if we're not perfect. That's good news. I hope that's good news. It should be good news. We're going to see a story next week that's wonderful. that's going to even talk about that more. About life is a struggle with God, okay? It's a struggle. We are never totally like letting God in or totally pushing God away. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. It goes it's not always at that same the level it needs to be. So here we have the story. So Jacob, the story of, Isaac had just gotten born. Then he almost got killed when Abraham had that testing thing with him about, sacrifice Isaac. And then Sarah dies. They find a wife for Isaac. Isaac marries her. She's barren. She has 2 kids. So the Isaac section is a very short section in Scripture. It is a linchpin. It is a transitionary kind of thing between the Abraham cycle of stories and the Jacob cycle of stories. We don't really have an Isaac cycle of stories. We just have like 2 or 3 stories about Isaac, and that's it. So next week we get into the Jacob cycle. I don't know how many of those we get into, but we get into one of the main ones of his career. Anyway, meditate on that. What is it in you that you think like, that's not a very good quality I've got. But you know what? God used it, or God can use it, or God does use it, or has used it, or how can God use it? These are valid questions that if we ask them and we get answers, we will find ourselves enlightened. We will find ourselves more in love with God, and we'll find ourselves more at home with who we are as people. That's pretty cool. That's good news. That's gospel, right? So, until next time, blessings.